If you're out there and you're like, man, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a business owner, or I've actually just thought of starting a podcast, I don't even have a business right now, think no more. It is the freaking way to go. It is the secret sauce, and the podcast is the future, and this is just the beginning. All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Report Saturday edition. And I got my co-host back for the first time in a couple weeks now.
Yep.
It's Alex Johnson. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you. How's it going? Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday. It's going really well. We got some sunshine outside. We just hosted our Beers and Deals June meetup. Mikey Taylor was in town. We had Goldfish was there.
Yeah.
The house was packed. It was good vibes.
Good vibes, beautiful weather. It was a good turnout.
Yes. We got Parker back in town.
Yep.
We just hired our marketing director, Megan, and we're rocking and rolling. And we got a really fun and exciting yacht meetup coming up June 22nd, Saturday.
Next weekend, yep.
Yep, next weekend, 12 to 4. So super excited for that. And I'm really excited for this podcast episode. We haven't done one of these in a minute, but I'm really excited to dive into this. And basically, we are going to talk about the 5 ways starting a podcast can change your life. I think a lot of people forget this is not my first podcast. This is my second crack at it. I had one many years ago that was started in December of 2019. Basically right when I was getting into the real estate investing game, and I was very green, but I had it with 2 old partners, and had a really cool podcast, but made a lot of mistakes along the way, a lot of learning lessons along the way, a lot of takeaways. And then when I split up with my old partners 21 months ago, I said, hey, you guys keep that podcast. They're still running it. And I said, I'm going to start my own. And so I took everything I liked and didn't like, and then I made it into this one. This one's in person. The old one was virtual. And you were there day 1, actually day 0, before I even launched it. And you basically helped me grow this thing from scratch. So thank you.
Yeah. No, happy to do it. I remember just going in and you were like, all right, we're going to launch this day. We made it happen. And sometimes you just have to go for it. I don't think you're ever going to be like fully ready. So yeah, it's been fun to see it grow, and to bring Parker on and just see it really, really grow and reach new audiences has been really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that I love what you said. You said, you're never going to be fully ready. You're never going to feel like you're ready. And I remember when we had 5 episodes teed up, because whenever you start one, you always want to drop a handful of episodes. It's the same reason when, you see new series on TV, like on Netflix especially, they don't just drop one episode, they drop a bunch of episodes so people can go and binge watch. But it helps the algorithm when you drop a podcast to have multiple episodes. But that said, I think it's easy for you to get caught up in analysis paralysis and the whole idea that like, hey, we need to have this whole thing perfect, ready to rock before we launch it. But we were kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Alex, no, we just gotta roll this thing out. Let's select a date, put it on the calendar, and rain or shine, this thing's going out. And we started it. And in all reality, like, you're not gonna have a ton of listeners day 1 anyway. So it's like the idea that it should be perfect, it actually doesn't make any sense. It's like, it's okay to make mistakes day 1 because you're not going to have many listeners anyways.
That's true. Time to work out the kinks and all that. So,
and I think if you're out there and you've ever had any inkling or any idea of like, man, I want to start a podcast, I will say it is the freaking secret sauce. All the stuff that we're doing with the business, all the capital that we're raising, all the revenue that we're bringing in for the other streams that we have and products that we have, 95% of it is actually coming from the podcast. And so if you're out there and you're like, man, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a business owner, or I've actually just thought of starting a podcast, I don't even have a business right now, like, think no more. It is the freaking way to go. It is the secret sauce, and the podcast is the future, and this is just the beginning. You might think, hey, I'm late to the party. Joe Rogan was like an early adopter. He's been doing it for 14 years now, 3 episodes a week, and look what it's done for him and his brand. All right, so let's just jump into it. Reason number 1 is brand recognition. There's a reason why Kylie Jenner became the world's youngest billionaire at age 21. There's a reason why Conor McGregor sold Proper 12 whiskey for a $600 million valuation. There's a reason why Dwayne Johnson's tequila brand, Terramana, sold for $3.5 million.
Dang.
It's not because they're the best entrepreneurs. It's simply because a lot of people know who they are, right? And so the brand recognition is huge, and a podcast can do that for you. Second reason is, it builds trust at scale, right? So, if you have a podcast, people are listening to hours and hours of you talk. They're listening to you while they drive at the gym, while they drive into work. And, with short form content, it's hard to build trust with a 35-second TikTok or a 40-second Instagram reel. But if you can get people to go over and listen to your podcast, now they're listening to hours and hours and hours of you talk, And, by the time they jump on to have a call with you about your product or maybe raising capital, whatever it might be, there's no conversation about the trust level. That's already there. It's really just a couple questions about what your product is to offer, what the return profile is. And if you're selling a product that's maybe a smaller price point, lower ticket, you might not even have to jump on a freaking call. So think about that. But, we're raising a lot of money for these real estate projects and our fund and all that sort of thing. But, a lot of these investors, they're wiring in a couple $100,000 at a time, $250,000, $300,000. And you guys would be surprised. A lot of these conversations are like 5-minute conversations. And then folks are wiring in their money because they've listened to hours and hours and hours of you speaking, right? And so it's huge. You've seen it. You're a director of investor relations, Alex.
Yep.
And honestly, like we've met really cool people like going on other podcasts as well. Like, for example, like one of our favorite investors, shout out to Brad. Brad found out about us by me going on Brad Lee's podcast, right? And I think one of the best ways to grow your own podcast is to actually go on other people's podcasts as well. So that's a big one right there. Next up, reason number 3 is it creates a high quality network, right? So I always say if you're not making the kind of money you want to be making, if you're not buying the type of real estate deals you want to be buying, well, it's simply because not enough people know who you are, right? That's just the truth. And so there's 2 ways to solve that. One, you can go out and find the network. You can go to real estate conferences. You can go to meetups and that sort of thing, and you can go meet folks. And that's the old school method. Or you can create something really cool, like a podcast, and watch the network come to you, right? And, one, it's not just the back end, but it's like the folks that are going to come on your podcast. Like think about, my relationship now with people like Grant Cardone, Tariq El-Moussa. Like Grant Cardone follows me on Instagram. I have his number. Like I can call Grant if I want to, and he'll pick up the phone. He knows who I am, and that's valuable. And you never know what those relationships will lead to down the road. For example, Tariq El-Moussa, HGTV, Flipper Flop. He's up in Newport Beach, but he reached out recently, not too long ago, and he is interested in doing a boutique hotel deal. And he wants to bring investor capital, and he's like, hey, dude, I'll bring some TV exposure and all that sort of thing. People like Brian Malarkey, Top Chef, Food Network. He's got a bunch of famous restaurants. He's been on the show. And he reached out recently too, and he wants to do a deal. And he's like, hey, dude, you do the hotel portion, I'll bring the restaurant portion. So those opportunities and those seeds, you never know what doors those are going to lead to. But most importantly is like none of those relationships would ever happen without this podcast.
That's true.
So think about that, right? Next up, it creates leads for your business. The old school method of having lunch or coffee and, basically meeting with someone for an hour and shaking one hand at a time. This is the old school way to meet folks, to meet clients, to raise money and all that sort of thing, bring in revenue for your business. Those days are gone. This is 2024. And those who adapt to technology, those who adapt to social media, those who adapt to the digital age are going to win. That's just the truth of the matter, the fact. And so now you can record a 40-second video and you can push it out to 20,000 people, 40,000 people. And who knows, maybe if that thing goes viral and it goes out to 4 or 5 million people, and think about the input of 40 seconds of your time. And now that goes out to 4 million people versus going and having a 2-hour lunch conversation with one person.
Think you
about
reach
that.
a lot more people a lot quicker.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all about the content because like now when I have like one-on-one meetings with people or for like doing like a consulting thing with someone in our hotel mastermind, I'm like, hey, let's bring on other people on the call. And so maybe they can gain value from it too. Let's turn the camera on, let's turn the mic on, and maybe we can repurpose it into content. So now it's like my 30-minute conversation with someone now that can go out to a lot of people.
Goes a lot further.
There's a lot more output, and it's part of leverage. Leverage is one of the most important keys to scaling. And once you understand leverage, you need to understand social media and the power of podcasting, all that sort of thing. It all feeds into the leverage. So next up, this is the 5th reason: establishes your expertise. I think the biggest limiting belief is you need to have experience or you need to be good on the microphone, right? I hear that all the time, but in our reality, you don't. When I started my first podcast, The Multifamily Takeoff, I was very, very green. I didn't really know a whole lot about real estate investing, but the beauty of it was I got to interview people that were a lot smarter than me, right? And so if you go back and listen to my first 30 episodes, I was nervous. I wasn't a good speaker, and I was very uncomfortable. And everything is uncomfortable when you start it. And now it's like after reps and reps and reps, I'm like, dude, I'm like not nervous anymore. You could bring in a big name guest and put him right here, and I'll just have a nice, free-flowing, organic conversation because I put in the reps, right? I used to be a shy kid growing up. And so My first job was actually at the mall here at a kiosk in the North County Mall in San Marcos. This is my first sales job, not my first job. My first job was actually working at a movie theater in San Clemente at the Korean movie theater. I was like an usher, just like ripping tickets for people and be
That's
like,
awesome. Ripping
your
tickets.
movie's going to be to the left side, number 2. It was so fun. But anyways, that said, my first sales job, I was 18, I was a freshman in college, and I was selling cell phones at the kiosk in the mall, and I was a shy kid at the time. And I remember I had to stand there and like greet strangers. And it was the most uncomfortable thing. But I forced myself to do it over and over and over. And then eventually I worked my way up and I worked my way up, and then I became top at sales. And now I think because of that job, I'm like when I see people in the street, like I just naturally say hi.
Yeah.
If I don't say hi, like
You
it
do.
feels
Yeah,
weird
you're
to
very
me. Like
friendly.
it's a lot harder for me not to say hi to a stranger than it is to say like, hey, what's up, dude? How you
Yeah.
doing today? It's fucking weird, right?
Yeah.
But I think the takeaway for the listeners is like, it did not come natural. I had to train myself to be this way.
Yeah.
I had to train myself to be better on the microphone. And I think when you guys are starting your podcast, like you got to look at it as like, you know, a lot of people look at it and they try to compare themselves to someone that has like a really well-known podcast, like Joe Rogan, for example. And they're like, dude, I'm never going to be able to compete. Like, this is an overwhelming thing. But in all reality, like, you need to just look at it as like one episode at a time.
Yeah.
And when you get to the second episode, just try to be 1% better than the first episode.
Yeah, you have to start somewhere.
Right.
Yep.
And then the next episode, you try to be 1% better. And that's kind of how I've approached it. And now when I look back at stuff that I've done 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 18 months ago, I'm like, whoa, it almost like makes me cringe a little bit because of the growth, right?
Yeah.
But that's how the growth happens. And so you just got to take it one step at a time. If you're posting on social media, you just got to take it one step at a time and just try to get 1% better. But that said, it establishes your expertise. And so what do I mean by that? I was green with the first podcast and I just started interviewing people that were much, much smarter than me. And just by literally asking questions that I legitimately have, it solved 2 problems. 1, I got to learn. 2, it started to, just by me having conversations with people that were smarter than me, listeners started to view me as the expert just simply by social collateral because I'm having conversations with people that are much smarter than me, right?
Yep.
And then eventually as you grow and you have more and more experience to talk about, then you can start chiming in more, you can start providing a lot more value. And so now when I have a podcast or when I do a podcast episode, I know based on the guest that's coming on, if I'm going to kind of hold back a little bit and let them do the majority of the talking, and I'm going to be more interviewing, or if I know, hey, like I'm going to have to like bring my A game and I'm going to have to deliver some good value as well, depending on the quality of guests that I bring on. Not quality of the guest.
That's a good point.
I wouldn't say quality of the guest. I would say based on the experience level of the guest. Does that make sense?
And the subject matter. Yeah, that makes sense.
Like if I bring Grant Cardone on, like people don't want to hear me talk for 70%. I'm going to let him talk for 70%, right?
Yeah.
But if I bring someone on that's only been investing in real estate for 2 years, I might do 50 to 60% of the talking, right? Because I want to make sure there's enough value gain for the listeners out there. Does that make sense?
Yep.
But early on, you can literally just sit there and interview people and you can do like 10% of the talking.
Notes,
it's easy. Yeah. So anyways, that starts to establish your brand. It starts to establish your expertise. And even if people don't listen to the podcast, you send them emails. You send emails whenever a new podcast drops. And that's how you're going to start to get your drip of audience. You're going to promote it on your social media as well. But even people that don't listen to the podcast are going to see Alex Johnson is dropping a new podcast episode at 6 a.m. every single Wednesday morning, like clockwork. And they're going to see Alex Johnson is rubbing elbows with all these bigger names that are smarter than her. And now they're going to start to trust Alex, and people do business with those they know, like, and trust. So it creates a lot of leads for your business. And if you don't have a business, that's okay. Start the brand, and then whatever business direction you want to go with, you already have customers that will buy whatever your product is. And that's the beauty of starting a personal brand. But the secret sauce of the brand is not social media. It's the actual podcast, because that's where it builds trust. And lastly, I'll say this. Out of all the mediums out there, we have TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, YouTube, podcasts. With the podcast, you got Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I would say most folks download this podcast on Apple Podcasts. Number 2 is probably Spotify. Out of all those mediums, the podcast audience by far is the most sophisticated. They're the most savvy. They have the highest net worth. They're action takers. They translate into the best clients because, and it makes sense because, think about it. These folks listening to podcasts are listening to you while they go to work. They're listening to you while they go to the gym, right? They're trying to better their lives.
Yeah, they're taking the time. They want to grow and like they want to better themselves. That's why
Yes.
they're listening to these podcasts.
I don't know anyone that listens to podcasts regularly that are not trying to better their lives.
Yep.
They're not just sitting at home just scrolling TikTok mindlessly, right?
Yeah.
And so those are the folks that you want to have as clients. And so when I talk to folks that I'm like, they're doing pretty good with their business, and I'm like, hey, do you have a podcast? And they're like, no. I'm like, dude, it's impressive to me. I'm like, damn, like you've come this far and you don't even have a podcast.
Yeah.
I'm like, bro, if you start a podcast, like your whole freaking life is going to change in 12 months.
Level up.
Yeah. And it can happen quickly, but the key is consistency. I think a lot of people start podcasts and then they don't see results in like a month, 2 months, and they give up. That's most people. But in all reality, like you got to commit to it for 12 months. And after 12 months, if you are consistent and you actually like give a shit, you will get good.
Yep.
And you will grow an audience, you will grow a listener base, and those will turn into loyal fans. They will turn into customers and clients and investors and all that sort of thing. And I can say, because of these 5 reasons, my life has completely changed because of the podcast. And I'm grateful for it. If you're listening to this and you're a listener, like I fucking love all you guys. I love all you gals. Like, and if I haven't met you, come out to San Diego. We would love to host you at one of our meetups or meetup, whatever. I would love to meet all you guys. You guys are always welcome to come into our office and say what's up anytime. And I mean that. And it's cool because like now I'm starting to get recognized more and more when I go out. It's happening more and more when we go out. I'm at the airport or I'm here locally, just walking around town. Like people stop me like all the time now. And it feels good because they're like, hey dude, like I just want to say like you inspire the fuck out of me, or like you inspired my fucking wife to like quit her job and buy a real estate deal or whatever. And that actually like feels good to know, like,
you never know.
Yeah. Like I'm actually helping people. Right. And so I say all this and that if you have any remote interest in starting a podcast or inspiring people, like that could be your superpower, inspiring a lot of people. And if you're holding that back, you should think twice because you could be reaching a big audience and you could be helping a lot of people change their lives as well. And it's not as hard as you think. It's not as hard as you think to get good guests on. You booked a lot of guests on the show before Lauren came on, but so you know the game. It's actually a lot easier to get good guests on than you think. One of the best ways to do it is find 3 or 4 podcasts in your niche, whether it's fitness, whether it's sporting, pickleball. It could be like whatever. It doesn't have to be business, right? Whatever your niche is, find 3 or 4 podcasts in that niche that you respect and go look at all their guests and invite those guests onto your podcast. And you'd be surprised. A lot of those guests will actually come on. And you don't have to have this big set. You can start with virtual. Virtual is completely fine. My first podcast was virtual. We didn't even have video for the first 30 episodes. And we raised a lot of investor capital.
You did.
My biggest investor to date, he's sunk in well over 7 figures. I'm a big fan. And he listened to my first podcast. He was living in Las Vegas and he showed up at one of our meetups and he said, hey dude, I listened to your podcast. I heard about your meetup. And that's turned into our biggest investor to date. Right?
That's crazy.
So,
that's cool.
If you've ever had any inkling of starting a podcast, it can change your life. And you don't have to do it alone. For the first time ever, we actually just rolled this out, the 7-figure creator. I'm super excited about it. I get amped up talking about it. But if you don't want to do it alone, you want to do it with a network of folks. We got about 26 members right now, all high-level people in different niches, fitness. We got doctors. We got people in real estate. We got people in entrepreneurship. But these are all people that are dialed. It's people that are into improving their lives and they're like serious about starting a podcast, growing their personal brands to ultimately get more leads for their business, start their own online community, or they already have their own coaching business and they're looking to scale it,
to grow,
raise private capital. We teach basically the A to Z, but it's really about content creation. All the things that I've done over the last 2 years, all the mistakes that I've made with my first podcast and this one, social media content, what works well to grow organically and 100% organically on social media so you can get more leads and really grow your personal brand. So if you're interested, you can go to the7figurecreator.com and it's 7 spelled just the number 7. The7figurecreator.com to book a free call to see if it'll be a good fit, and looking forward to working with a lot of folks. I was actually working
It's a great community.
Oh my God, it's great. I was working out with a bunch of them on Wednesday morning. A bunch of other folks went out this morning. So it's great. It's more than just the content. It's a lot of different things, but I'm super excited for the group. And I'm very grateful for, everything that we're doing, whether it's you on the team and all the listeners. So shout out to listeners. I love all you guys. And I think this concludes this episode of the Saturday edition. She's Alex Johnson. I'm Rich Summers. Listeners, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.